Young citizens, I am Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of these United States, defender of the Union, warrior against the injustice of slavery, the great emancipator, but feel free to call me Abe. I may have been assassinated, but my words have lived on. That's the power of a good speech. I was a good orator, if I do say so myself. Others have been far more generous and called me one of the greatest orators of all time who fully understood the power of words. They may be exaggerating, but they are right about one thing. Words have power.
Okay, as we begin our summary, we will start with Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address as delivered in the movie Saving Lincoln. After that preview of the Gettysburg Address, we will go ahead and look at a short historical summary of that speech, and then I will explain the assignment. Let's begin.
The President of the United States!
Resistance to the war was growing. Mr. Lincoln needed to reinvigorate the people, to explain to them, and perhaps himself, why this endless plague of war must continue.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Even though Abraham Lincoln's 1863 speech in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, is the speech that everyone remembers, Lincoln was not the featured speaker that day. That honor went to Edward Everett. Lincoln and Everett had traveled to Gettysburg to dedicate a national cemetery. Sadly, the United States needed one because of the tremendous death toll of the Civil War. Everett, a former senator and the former president of Harvard College, was known as a wonderful speaker. He gave a powerful speech that day and addressed the crowd for more than 2 hours. Lincoln's speech was not nearly that long. The Gettysburg Address lasted about 2 minutes and is only 272 words, but those words are very memorable. When Lincoln stepped to the podium, his first words were about the Founding Fathers and what they intended for the new nation. Lincoln drew from the Declaration of Independence when he said that the nation was based on the idea that all men are created equal. While that may not seem very controversial today, this was a radical idea in 1863. The Constitution said nothing about equality. Lincoln was saying that the Founding Fathers were the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, not the signers of the Constitution. It was a message to Confederates, who liked to point out that the Constitution did not prohibit slavery. Lincoln implied that the Declaration of Independence expressed what the Founding Fathers really wanted for the United States. Lincoln then said that the country was fighting a civil war to determine if a nation based on equality can long endure. The men who died in battle had given their lives to help preserve the Union. That was the reason for the new national cemetery. However, Lincoln said that that work was not done. It was up to the living to continue to fight for the country's survival so that these dead shall not have died in vain. Lincoln urged Americans to stay focused on keeping the Union together so that democracy, or government of the people, by the people, for the people, could survive. If there was any doubt about what the motivation for the Civil War had evolved to become, Lincoln cleared it up at the end of the Gettysburg Address. When the war began in 1861, Lincoln's goal was to keep the United States alive. He firmly believed that, in order for the nation to survive, the southern states had to be brought back into the Union. That goal was not eliminated, but over time, the war became about more than putting the country back together. When Lincoln said that the nation shall have a new birth of freedom, he said that the war was about ending slavery too. Lincoln never said the word slavery, but it was understood that the people in the United States who were not already free were slaves. Today, most people consider the Gettysburg Address to be one of the most important speeches in American history. Not everyone felt that way in 1863. The reaction to it depended on who you asked. It is not surprising that most Republicans thought that the Republican president gave a great speech, while most Democrats criticized it for being too short. Everett thought it was very good, and wrote to the president to tell him that he managed to say in 2 minutes what Everett could not say in 2 hours. As for Lincoln, he thought the speech was a failure. It did not get much reaction from the crowd, possibly because they were surprised that it was so short. One thing is for sure. When Lincoln said the world would not long remember what we say here, he could not have been more wrong.